girl posted, "This gonna be my first summer being a hoe, and I'm nervous. Any tips?" Look at the comments, yo. Tell them all different birthday month to keep the gifts rolling in. Your place is completely off limits. Always have your own money and protection. You should have an eater or two spenders, a YN, and romance on your roster. Be safe and have fun. Your starting five: one backbreaker, two munch, three money bags, a Mr. Fix It, a Mr. Romance. Keep them rotating. Heavy on the Mr. Fix It. Hey, I ain't even mad at you, sister. Call them all by one nickname so you don't accidentally say the wrong name. Bro, they take pics when they are asleep just in case they blackmail you and you got a Uno reverse. Protect yourself and walk away at the first red flag. Be picky about your tricks. Get a Google Voice number. If you have an iPhone, change the FaceTime settings to only show your email. And lastly, create an iPhone profile and use it during hoeing hours. Stay safe and stay dangerous. Jesus Christ.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Making It Case. We on episode 115, man. Hey, if you couldn't tell by watching the clip, we're talking about a very controversial, hot button topic. We're talking about polygamy. Now, I'm asking the question, should polygamy be a viable option? Okay. Now, yes, the video clip I show you, it's humorous, right? But it has more truth in it than you might think. Okay. I think, well, a lot of people know of the 304 phase or the whole phase, right? It's not a phase. Okay. And the reason why it's not a phase, because as mammals and human beings, it comes natural to us to sleep with multiple people. And we got to think about it in this way. Well, many of us, before we actually settle down with one person and form a monogamous relationship, have been with quite a few people. Now, we're talking about in modern times, right? We're not talking about 30, 40, 50 years ago when people, were more apt to, finding morally excuse me, morally corrupt to sleep with multiple people. Okay. So we're talking about now where there's many different reasons and many different factors of why it's more acceptable to have many partners before you even couple up with somebody. Some of those factors we're going to go into in this video. I'm taking it back old school with this one. That's the only video clip I'm actually going to show you. I actually got some articles that I want to read to you to kind of make my case. Okay. If you've been with me for a while, my very first episode was on why monogamy is not natural. Okay. And now here we are on episode 115, and we didn't work our way all the way back to talking about, well, now we're specifically talking about polygamy. But of course, monogamy is also going to be in that. But that just lets you know that if it took 114 more episodes, it just lets you know we got a lot to talk about. Okay. And we're very versatile over here. But there's a reason why I want to come back to this topic, because unfortunately, a lot of us do not realize that a lot of people are living polygamous lifestyles. And really the only difference is that people are not wanting to get married. Really, they polyamorous. Polyamorous means that you want multiple people just without the marriage. Polygamy includes marriage. All right. Now, what I say is we should be polygamous because we should have a more of a legal attachment. And I'm not talking about the legal attachment when it comes to the government, but there should be paperwork that you sign and make sure that you are legally responsible for taking care of somebody else. Okay. Because I think you can't get around that. That's the only way you really going to keep people kind of doing their duty. Right. Nowadays, it just is what it is. Right. I mean, people are signing NDAs and all type of stuff. Right. We're just living a time where it's all about the paperwork. and it just is what it is. So whether you polyamorous or whether you polygamous, poly is in it, right? And a lot of people don't want to admit it. And I'm going to show you an article that's going to break down why literally monogamy is not natural. Because you have to think that you have to be honest. And one thing we're not honest with ourselves when we say that, you know what, can I really see myself living the rest of my life just being sexually active and only one person? Even the thought and sound of that sounds crazy to me anyway. Okay, so there's a reason why we say people settle down. It's in the word, right? You settle for one person to spend the rest of your life with. Okay. Now, there's also reasons behind why you want to be monogamous, and we're going to get into some of those reasons as well. So, I'm not saying that monogamous should not be the main thing that people should doing. What I'm suggesting is polygamy should be a viable option because we're doing it anyway. That's all I'm saying, right? And it shouldn't be illegal, right? The crazy thing is, we'll legalize marijuana, we'll legalize the death penalty, we'll legalize abortion, we'll legalize gambling, we'll legalize all these different things. But then polygamy, that's where we draw the line. It's crazy. All right. So in today's episode, we're gonna go into why polygamy should be a viable option, why polygamy is natural, actually, and just some numbers, some stats to back up my claim. All right. So without further ado, let's get into my first article. We taking it way back. All right, let's go. All right. So really, we can go back to when I used to say for my first piece of evidence, right? What I want to start with is we understand when it comes to sex, sexual relationships in general. Of course, the highest honor that you can give somebody is marriage, and we know a lot of time marriage is dictated through religion. All right, so I want to start with a whole religious concept and idea behind polygamy, right? Now, for those of you that are familiar with the Bible, consider yourself Christian or just a believer, right? You understand that in the Bible, polygamy run all through it, right? And more specifically, we're talking about the Old Testament, right? Now, we know that the New Testament came around and quote unquote was supposed to correct things, right? You got to correct God, but that's neither here nor there, right? Well, this conversation is not to criticize and to bash religion, but it is to point out some inconsistencies, some hypocrisy in it as it relates to human beings and their sexual relations. So I want to read a quick, really, this is not an article, this is a question that was asked and answered from a website called Got Questions. I've heard of it before. I think I may even did an article from it or did something on it a long time ago. But so let's actually read the question and the answer because I thought it was pretty interesting. So it says the question is, why did God allow polygamy slash bigamy in the Bible? Which is a great question, right? So let's see what the answer says. While the Bible nowhere explicitly condemns polygamy, God made his ideal for marriage clear throughout scripture. One man with one woman. Interesting, right? Even though we know when it comes to antiquity and most of human history was polygamous. So I guess for a very long time, since the beginning of human civilization, people have been going against the word of God. But that's neither here nor there. Let's keep going. The first instance of bigamy in the Bible is that Lamech in Genesis 4:19. Lamech, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, married two women. Several prominent men in the Old Testament were polygamists. We do know this. Abraham, Jacob, David, Solomon, and others all had multiple wives. Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines, essentially wives of a lower status, according to 1 Kings 11:3. What are we to make of these instances of polygamy in the Old Testament? There are three questions that need to be answered. Why did God allow polygamy in the Old Testament? How does God view polygamy today? And why did it change? So you mean to tell me that God can change his mind on whether people should have multiple wives? Or once again, are these just human beings talking and human beings write what they want to write based on evolution and based on cultural variations and changes that happen throughout history, whether that's religion, politics, culture, language, etc. Okay. I thought this was an important question to start with because how can a book have polygamy but condone polygamy at the same time as saying we should be monogamous? Interesting. This is going to feed the other two things that I want to show you. All right. So we know that God essentially is saying that no, we should be one man, one wife, right? Just like how people was against gay marriage because they were saying it's one man and one woman, right? But we know gay marriage is legalized now, right? So are or is a country who's a Christian country going against God by actually legalizing gay marriage? That is another great question. Now, isn't it? Okay. So let's not get caught up in this though. Let's move forward because I got a couple of more interesting things that I want to show you. All right. Let's get to it. All right. So here's my next piece of evidence that I wanted to bring to your attention on why polygamy should be a viable option. So this is from a very popular news outlet called a Gallup, very reputable. You may have heard of it. And the title of this article is Understanding the Increase in Moral Acceptability of Polygamy, right? Because we understand when it comes to sexual relations and what should be the actual thing that human beings should ascribe to, it is based on religion, it's based on morality, all right? But things have changed, all right? Particularly over the last 30, 40 years. A lot has changed. All right. So we're going to see why some of them things have changed. All right. So let's read a good bit of this. Uh, it says, one thing I look forward to each May is the moral acceptability section of Gallup's values and belief poll, the section that provides a list of behaviors and asks Americans to say whether each is morally acceptable or morally wrong. So they do a poll on different topics of whether they feel like something is morally correct or morally corrupt. Okay. Um, 90% of Americans say birth control is morally acceptable, which when you think about it, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Putting it at the top of the list while just 9% say that married men and women having an affair is morally acceptable, putting that behavior at the bottom, which that also makes sense, right? Most people are definitely not going to be for people cheating on each other, all right? So let's move forward. The survey has been asking about most of the behaviors on the list since the early 2000s, giving us excellent trend lines for gauging how the public views on morality have morphed in one direction or the other over time. Megan Review pointed out that the proportion of Americans who find the death penalty morally acceptable, now 54%, is the lowest in our history of asking that question. Another important trend has been the increase in moral acceptability of gay and lesbian relations. Absolutely. That has definitely changed, particularly over the last 20 years. Now 66%, which definitely got to be the highest in human history, up from as low as 38% in 2002. And it's important to note that married men and women having an affair has essentially held this position as a lasting taboo in American society. Of course, that makes extreme amount of sense. Uh, but what fascinates me as much as anything else is the trend of polygamy. When Gallup first included polygamy on a list in 2003, so we got a 22-year sample, 7% of Americans said it was morally acceptable, and that fell to 5% in 2006. So 3 years later, it fell. But over the past decade, this percentage has gradually increased, moving to double digits in 2011, reaching 16% in 2015, and this year at 20%, the highest in history. So 20% of people agree with polygamy. In short, there has been a fourfold increase in American public acceptance of polygamy in about a decade and a half. The key question, of course, is why? What's behind this upswing and the moral acceptability of polygamy? Let's see. So let's get into the why, right? First, it's important to locate polygamy in the context of the broad list of 21 moral issues tested in the May survey. Although the acceptability of polygamy has risen significantly, its relative position near the bottom of the list of moral behavior hasn't changed a great deal. Polygamy is now fourth from the bottom on the list of 21 behaviors, above married men and women having an affair, cloning humans, and suicide. In 2003, when we first included it, polygamy was second from the bottom of the list of 16 behaviors tested, by 1 percentage point seen as more acceptable than married men and women having an affair, 1 point lower than cloning human beings. And I would say that it's just going to keep rising. Okay. Polygamy has basically been a part of the rising tide of American acceptance of a number of moral behaviors. This means one explanation for the increased acceptability of polygamy, and perhaps a more plausible one, lies with the fact that it's a part of a general trend of increased liberalism on moral issues. Agreed. When you look at gay marriage, when you look at abortion, when you look at a lot of issues, people are softening their stance. When you look at transgender, like there's a lot of different issues that people are softening their stance on, right? Um, Particularly as you start seeing things get pushed in the mainstream, pushed in schools and things of that nature, like times have changed, right? If you want to call it being woke, which I think that word has been corrupted, but times have changed and people are more liberal, even though, anyway, won't need to go down that rabbit hole. Let's see. So let's get into more so the why. Increased representation of polygamy in entertainment media. Another quite interesting explanation for Americans' increased acceptance of polygamy is a more frequent portrayal of polygamous households in the mass media. In popular culture, there are books, movies, television, and so on over time. So I'm making some assumptions here, but it's undeniable that we have seen a number of representations of polygamy in popular television show series and documentary in recent years. Sister Wives, Big Love, Tiger King, etc. Right, which is true, and we know the media machine is huge when it comes to pushing a certain image. Right, when people see it, they're gonna have questions. They're gonna want to do it. Like, we understand this, right? There has been little legal change in the status of polygamy. It is still illegal in all 50 states of the union, although Utah recently reduced the penalty for polygamy from a felony to a misdemeanor as long as no force or coercion is involved. It's crazy that polygamy is a felony. Like, that's crazy. That the fact that the government want to say that, and of course, it's religion based, that the government even cares how many people you with. Now, we understand this. This is just talking about marriage, right? Because we know you can have as many girlfriends as you want to. But you can also legalize it in paperwork. We do know that as well. But it's just so many other things that Americans agree with. And polygamy is just one of these taboo, like they said, topics that people are slowly kind of coming around on. So decrease in traditional marriage may be a factor. Absolutely. Another possible explanation for the increased acceptance of polygamy lies with changes in traditional marriage in society. Our Gallup data show that married people are significantly less likely than unmarried people to find polygamy morally acceptable. These married views of polygamy has been getting larger over time. from a 3-point difference between those married and those unmarried in 2003, 2006. Um, Thus, two things relating to marriage have affected the overall percentage of the population who find polygamy acceptable. More unmarried people in the population, and the fact that these unmarried people are increasingly likely to find polygamy acceptable. Absolutely. And the fact that you have so many single people. And a lot of single people, what are they doing? They're dating. Who are they dating? They're dating a lot of people. And they're having sex with each other. So polygamous situations are happening because people are so selective when it comes to their mate selection. They're not going to settle. This is what they're worth. All right. While at the same time, they're still having sex. Okay. Demographic subgroup trends. Most attitudes about moral issues differ among subgroups of the population, and polygamy is no exception. The defined variable in which views of polygamy pivot are age. Young people are much more accepting, of course. Religiosity, with the less religious, more accepting. Marital status, not married, more accepting. And political identity, Democrat, more accepting. Okay. So those are more factors of why polygamy seem to be, or the idea that it's okay to be in a polygamous situation is on the rise. All right. And I'm gonna stop it right there because I think you kind of get the idea of why um, people are kind of turning the corner on polygamy. And as I already been stating, people are living either polyamorous or polygamous lifestyles anyway. Even if they quote unquote supposed to be in a monogamous situation, they're dealing with people outside of their relationship. And these are just the facts, right? And we could talk about the numbers all we want to as far as people cheating, and we know that's self-reporting, and we know that everybody is not honest. So um the last thing I want to get to, I saved the best for last, of course. All right. So let's get into it to wrap up the video. All right. As I said, I saved the best for last, and I must admit, this is not a cold read. I did already read through this already. And I thought it was very interesting. Gave some very good information. So I want to deliver it to you. And from one of my favorite platforms that I used to read from all the time, which is the Medium. Definitely a great platform. I suggest you definitely check them out because they have articles and topics like this all the time. They're like the written version of what I like to do in the verbal, which is talk about topics that most people are not touching on. All right. So really they should be my show sponsor, but that's a whole nother idea. Oh, but so let's get into it. So the topic of this article is humans are made to be polygamous, which when you do the research and in my very first video, I pulled out uh a few articles of studies that's already been done. So there's so much research on this already. So um it's kind of irrefutable, but the only kind of case you can make is a moral one, right? A religious claim. But other than that, if you coming from it from a biological social standpoint, you're gonna lose. But that's not the purpose of this. The purpose of this is to get the information out. So let me get to you know to the good stuff, really. um Let's see. Oh, I do want to read this though. It said polygamy was discarded as free spirited sexual adventurism or an alternative hippie lifestyle. That is kind of how they tried to demonize people wanting to be with more than one person, right? They also used to say you was evil and you need to cast demons out of you and stuff like that. Like it's just crazy. Because of course it's all about control, right? They want you to be a certain way because it benefits them, right? Because to be honest with you, a polygamous lifestyle where people are coupling together and sharing resources and helping each other actually benefits culture, right? But of course, the powers that be, they don't want it to benefit culture. They want as many taxpayers as possible, right? But that's a whole nother story. So, all right, here we get into the good stuff. Acknowledged evolutionists and anthropologists discovered that human beings evolved in a regimen that was often polygamous. In fact, 80% of early human society were polygamous. When we did a total shift, what we know nowadays, only 2% of the world is polygamous. And most of that is in Africa because it's more cultural there. Okay. There are many reasons for this: convenience, survival, etc. But I want to introduce you to the hidden biology. Okay. And of course, we know capitalism was a huge effect on that, and many other factors. The balance of evidence indicates that we are biologically inclined towards polygamy, but many of us are retaining this urge to sleep around. Absolutely. The clip that I showed you in the beginning, see, a lot of women have the urge to sleep with multiple men, but they don't want to be considered promiscuous. They don't want to be shamed and shunned. They don't want that scarlet leather. They don't want to be dismissed by their family. See, it's ramifications, more ramifications for women if they do it. And we, of course, we know if a man does it, it's totally different. So, but it's not the fact that a woman don't want to sleep with somebody else, particularly if they're with somebody who's not sexually satisfying them. Let's keep going. We are biologically designed to be mildly, not wildly polygynous, like in comparison to extreme cases such as elephant seals and gorillas. Excuse me. Clue. The male to female size ratio. The bigger the difference in size between males and female, the greater the competition. Though not as pronounced in sea lions and gorillas, our sexual dimorphism resemble those polygamous species more than it does monogamous species such as wolves. You know directly if you have a man or a woman in front of you, whereas I don't know how to differentiate the gender of a wolf. That's a good point. Australopithecine males, apes relative to humans, for instance, that lived millions of years ago, were 50% heavier than females. 2, clue. You are most probably familiar with Darwin's survival of the fittest. Women in disease-prone countries may prefer super healthy, physically attractive men to father their offspring. To make this sound more daily life-ish, women and men are inclined to make the best choice, which, of course, would be better for monogamous situations, right? I choose you to have offspring with. We need to bond together and come together and protect our offspring. And monogamy would make sense to be the best thing to do that, right? We get together and break up because something is missing. We need to have several partners to know what we want and not want, to find the best match for us and provide future harmony for our children. And this is what we're seeing nowadays, right? The reason why women don't want to get married at 19, 20, and 21, which used to be a norm back then, is because they want to experience life, which means they want to experience other men. Because this is what women really feel. And please, ladies, correct me if I'm wrong. They feel like if they get into a monogamous situation too early or in general, that they're going to be controlled by that man. It's going to be certain things that man is not going to allow them to do or going to look down upon them if they do it. So that's why a lot of times women, when they say they single by choice, this is what they mean by it. But they don't want to be single. What they're saying is, I don't want to be controlled. I want to be in control of what I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it. Let's keep reading. Clue. The size of the testicle. The bigger the balls, the higher the polygamous drive. I never heard that before. I'm sorry. It's tripping me out. That's because polygamy is characterized by high competition. Every male wants to impress the female the most. Human men certainly don't have the biggest testicle on earth, but they get the crown amongst all primates. Okay? And we know testosterone has a huge amount to do in sexual drive when it comes to men. Clue. Some people are monogamous by their very nature. Think personality, attraction, libido, etc. That makes so much sense, right? I met a young lady today that like barely even was standing right in front of me, barely even spoke. You could tell that just by her nature and personality, she wouldn't be someone who would be comfortable around too many people. But if she do find one person, she's gonna stick to that one person. This is evidenced by them trying to fail to be monogamous despite threats of loss of love, marriage, money, reputation, job, etc. So even genes do play a role. But that's why I say that polygamy should be a viable option because most people are not going to want to be polygamous. Like it's a lot of work, right? It's a lot of emotions involved and things of that nature. So it's a lot of different moving parts. When you talk, especially if you're talking about having multiple kids with multiple people, right? Most people just want that one person that they can confide in, that they can be with, right? But at the end of the day, we have options in everything else. Why will we even tell people, animals, mammals? First of all, we can't. We know that we just human civilization tell us that the more you tell somebody they can't do something, the more they're gonna want to do it. You've heard that before. All right, let's keep going. Um, so it says so even genes do play a role. I think I might have read that already. Um, clue: polygamy is a prominent driver of sexual evolution. The more partners you get to know, the more you experience and innovate. Especially women are more satisfied when they have the choice to change bedroom once in a while. You hear that? Women. They are reaching climax more often. On the contrary, sexual frustration leads to unproductivity. Right now, sometimes women you can't miss what you never had. Right, but it's very much harder for a woman to climax an orgasm versus a man. Right. So if she with somebody and she's not reaching that peak, eventually she's going to get sexually frustrated, which might lead to cheating, which might lead to being sexually active with somebody else. I mean, that's biology, right? According to biology, modern human beings should be described as being a mix of monogamous and polygamous. Throughout our evolutionary history, monogamy and polygamy may have switched places as being the dominant human mating strategy a number of times, which that makes sense. After all we know now, I have one question. Why did monogamy become the norm? Monogamy is more economical. Like, let's not waste our time and energy fighting over females, right? Makes sense. It's more it economically makes sense, right, for you to just focus on one person and y'all build together, right? Polygamy tends to cause social problems, leaving many angry men without wives and inclined to behaving risky, right? Because biologically, women want the stronger male. They want the more dominant male. They want the alpha male, right? So even if it's six women, right, to that one man, you might leave a man out there. And he like, man, I want multiple women, but he could barely get one. So that competition, and then when men get angry, they start doing stupid stuff, which means getting violent. Socially, religious, and legal constraints play a gigantic role. Polygamy is politically fraught, economically disruptive, economically confusing, illegal in some states, and yet we are biologically predisposed. Right? Nature's versus nurture. But when it comes to politics, it's all about who run it. Right? Human nature became a social construct and is often not biologically founded. Existing competing narratives are much more about interests and illusions than what is actually true. Okay, pushing that narrative, we know for sure. Um, yeah, that's it. All right, so there you have it, folks. And of course, you know, I could pull out article after article, study after study, that show you that by nature, we're polygamous. But like the article said, we're polygamous and monogamous because, like, to be honest with you, for most of us, it works nowadays, particularly since we are living a sedentary lifestyle, meaning that we're staying put, right? that it just makes sense, right, for us to find one partner. But our natural inclination and drive is to literally experience other people. Think about it. You don't want just one friend. That's a relationship. Okay. A lot of time people don't want just one child. And if you do just want one child, it's pretty selfish because you just want one child just to have the experience of it, because you don't want more than one child because you really want to live your life, but you just want to experience parenthood, right? We don't want more than, we don't want just one car, just one pair of jeans. Like the list goes on and on, right? Like, so it's rarely anything that we just want one of. I'm sure that I can think of something that we just want one of, but it's not coming to the top of my head. Like, by just naturally, like, we want excess, right? Particularly in the West, right? And what we have established is we want things in abundance, right? And of course, having more than one person, I mean, it would make sense in that because, and really, it's about having a sexual experience with more than one person. That's really what it's about, because most men and women don't want to take care of more than one person, right? Some of us do, most of us don't. Okay. So all I'm saying is polygamy should be a viable option for those who want to do it. And it should be legalized because, once again, most people don't want to do it, right? So I do think it will eventually be legalized, because if gay marriage will get legalized, why wouldn't polygamous marriage be legalized? I mean, come on. All right. All right. So we're going to end the video there, man. Hopefully you gained a new perspective. You know, of course, that topic is not easy, particularly for women. But like I said, it's not a gender thing, it's a human thing, right? So both men and women have the inclination to be polygamous and to want more than one partner, right? So don't think this just goes towards one gender, because it does. All right. But as always, I'm you are me. Love always, love eternal. Remember, the worst thing you can do is lie to yourself. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Deuces. One love.